everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Omnichannel Marketer. Today, I have Danny Taing, founder of Bokksu. Super excited to have you, Danny.
Super excited to be here.
So, would love to just, kick things off with your personal story and, how you came to found Bokksu.
So for me, I was born and raised in New York City area, but then after college where I studied Japanese, I ended up moving to Tokyo and living for a total of 4 years there. I was studying Japanese further, but then also worked at a Japanese tech company called Rakuten. And so it was kind of during that time that I further kind of fell in love with Japanese language, food, culture, ate a lot of amazing snacks from all across Japan because every single region and city has their own specialty snack, which is something very unique and I've never seen in any kind of country or place I've been to. But I mean, I actually never intended to be an entrepreneur. It always kind of like stumbled into it when I moved back to New York around 10 years ago now. And then it was a combination of losing access to those snacks as well as seeing that like you can't find them here and that there was this huge gap between what people think about Japan and Asia and what's actually there. So like a lot of my friends thought that Japanese people just ate like sushi and ramen every day. And I was like, no, there's like a lot more going on in Japan than that as well. And so I was like, wait, let me try and start something to help bridge cultures, like kind of bridge this gap. And that's where the idea of Bokksu came around. And I started it as a solo bootstrap founder in my living room in New York City around 8 years ago.
Okay, and so what is Bokksu now?
It's become so much more. I can't even imagine what Bokksu would have been back then to now type of thing. Like I was always hoping it would expand and evolve, but it's kind of almost like your own child. Like it kind of grows in ways that are unexpected. Some really wonderful, some have been challenging type of thing. But so Bokksu now has become multi-brand, omni-channel kind of platform where we don't just have a online monthly snack subscription box, which is still kind of our core hero product that people know about us about, and that's how they discover all these amazing traditional, authentic regional snacks from Japan that are exclusive to Japan and Bokksu. But now we also have a couple of online e-commerce stores selling everything from online Japanese groceries like Bokksu Market to one brand called Sugoi Mart, which is actually one of our fastest growing brands where we're selling essentially Japanese pop culture and limited edition goods. So anime, gaming, cute things, Starbucks limited edition mugs and tumblers from Japan. All of these things you can only find in Japan and you can buy through Sugoi Mart. But then very excitingly is last year, we've now also expanded into retail. So up until now, everything has pretty much been shipped directly from Japan to customers in America and around the world, cross-border D2C shipping. But now we're also importing products from Japan and wholesaling it to retailers across America, such as World Market, Hot Topic, Urban Outfitters, and we just closed CVS and WH Smith and things like that as well. So really cultures now through different channels.
Would you say that kind of the bridging the culture is where like the origin of the brand really comes from and how you think about the new multi-brands that you're bringing on?
Yeah, that's pretty much everything we think about as our core when we think about like expanding or evolving or pivoting or any type of like into new integration we do into the business. We make sure that we're targeting non-Japanese people, a lot of times non-Asians as well, to like get people to try and then love and learn about this new culture. And so that affects everything from not only our branding and our copy, but also even this curation, merchandising, the way we source products, like what we know will do well across different brands. So a good example is like there are existing online Chinese grocery stores that do really well. Like Say We is a really famous one that has raised like $800 million.
Wow.
And but they sell things like durian or like kind of really kind of more exotic fruits that are not as palatable or loved by kind of Americans. And so what we try and do is based on the channel and based on the audience, we find even what we internally call like bridge products, products that can like are a little bit different from people know, but not so different that they can't like try it. And then little by little, we try and educate people and get them to love more and more of these kind of bridge products. And so that's kind of one of the difficult things that we work on constantly is getting this feedback loop with our customers.
And what does that feedback loop with your customers look like right now?
Certainly, we send out a monthly survey after every single subscription box. We get their data and ask them like what they thought about the box, individual snacks, balance, etc. We also have sales data on the things we sell a la carte as well, not just in the subscription, but on our e-commerce stores. And then beyond that, when we want to dive deeper, we have our brand teams do like interviews with some of the customers too, where we like compensate them for like a gift card or something. And then we kind of dive deep in 30 minutes about XYZ and get some of that qualitative feedback, and we compile that, and that helps us have a better understanding of where we should go.
Have you started to develop different personas of what your customers are in, this broader omni-channel conglomerate that you're building?
We know it for our online brands.
Mm,
Retail, since it's relatively newer for us, which we haven't fully dived into that too deeply, but we have a fairly good idea because of the fact that we sell a lot of these products in retail ourselves
yeah.
online as well. So we
Hmm.
like kind of use that as a proxy for what we think those consumers are, and they are different across some of our different brands and the products we sell. And so that's been really exciting to see how we tailor the messaging differently too.
So taking you back to 8 years ago when you were starting Bokksu, this is like pre-Shopify boom. How did you think about how did you think about like launching an online only brand to start? How did you think about subscription? What inspired that as a channel for you, which was honestly before the D.
Some of the big reasons was that it was kind of almost having done a bunch of research. And also, like one thing I don't talk about too often, just because it makes the story longer, is that Bokksu was kind of my fourth pivot or idea. I'd worked
Mm.
on lots of other things before, not even ecom, totally not related and different. And so when I was pivoting again, I wanted to work on something that had recurring revenue, that had kind of built-in retention, that wasn't always just one-time purchases. And so then when I kind of researched a bit more, I was like, oh, subscription boxes are a good way. And then so it was kind of depending on the conditions and factors and environment I was in. And the other big one was the fact that I was bootstrapped. And so I needed to find a way to grow a business without much cash. And if you do an e-commerce store with a bunch of SKUs, you kind of need a good amount of capital and you need to store it somewhere. But the beautiful thing about subscription boxes, if you do it correctly, is you just get inventory as needed. They barely are stored. They kind of come in and they come out right away, type of thing. And so those things combined were one of the big reasons that I thought subscription boxes were a good way to go. And then also when I did research into my specific space of Japanese snacks, I saw that there were existing players in the space. I mean, one good example is even Japan Crate, who I ended up acquiring last year. But like they were actually 2 years older than Bokksu, but they did it in a very different way. They're doing more like pop culture, Japanese Kit Kats, and I wanted to do more like traditional family business snacks and things like that. So it's like kind of different enough that I was able to start what I did, and then that allowed me to continue scaling without any capital infusion for like 3+ years.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I mean, it's something I actually have been talking about a lot because subscription is a really great business. You see, there's subscription boxes, but you see almost every product, if they can, is thinking about how they could, in somehow be a subscription business because you have that recurring revenue. And, that obviously that calc to LTV is pretty attractive when done correctly. How has that evolved as you've, started to either acquire these new businesses? I imagine the same customers that you've acquired for Bokksu can then potentially be introduced to these other brands as well, or how do you think about that as the business grows?
So the way we see it is that subscription will always be kind of our underlying core in our online business. And especially because as we have ventured into like kind of general e-com, we do find that the retention is not the same. Like it's a lot more work to get people to come back and recheck out, right? As opposed to simply set it and forget it type of thing, as long as they're happy. But at the same time, there is kind of a wheel you kind of get stuck into in subscriptions where it is sometimes hard to extend the LTV on a subscription alone. So there's got to be other things you can do. And some people do things like add-ons or et cetera. But what we found has worked relatively well for us is to have related brands in e-commerce stores because not everybody necessarily wants a subscription, but also people may want to restock this in the box, or they might want to just buy totally different things just within the same culture or same sphere. And now that they trust you, that's like a pretty good way to extend them. And so that's how we see a lot of our e-commerce store brands is like, well, you know and love Bokksu. Now shop on Bokksu Boutique for like kind of giftable, rare things in Japan, or Sugoi Mart, as I mentioned, for like more pop culture, fun, limited edition things. And so we do a good amount of life cycle marketing to make sure we cross sell, make it known, and we were still working on it. There's like a lot of brands to kind of integrate and to make sure that it feels smooth and not too confusing or like, what is this brand, et cetera. So that's something we're continuing to work on. But we believe that that's a big core of like acquiring customers in different places and finding the best ways to cross sell, upsell them.
So, from the life cycle marketing perspective, is that primarily mail and SMS?
Primarily email. We have really pulled back on SMS. We have found that, especially as we've been around for a bit, as we talked about, like pretty early, like, and back then there was no SMS marketing in 2016 when we launched. But I think SMS marketing got hot probably around like 2019, 2018, 2019. I would guess together and say, like back then it used to work fairly well, and but now I think people are just so used to it slash like ignore it. Like they might have high open rates, but then the actual conversions are not super great, and it costs a lot of money to send it out. So what we have found is that it works well in limited situations. So if there's like a flash sale, limited new drop, new arrival, limited quantity, things that have a very specific time limit, that can work well. But for things that are like your subscription box that you're trying to kind of sell people, there's also just not enough space to like educate or excite people. And we have found that the ROI is just not worth it. And so even though people have been bemoaning the death of email marketing for years and years, we have still found that if you do it right, that's still kind of the most tried and true, but you have to do it smartly. Like you have to have good customer journey orchestration. You have to like kind of seed them in certain ways so that they kind of get the storytelling of your brand and what product you're selling and things.
That's really interesting. And it makes complete sense as you're kind of like educating the customer in that text. It's, harder to provide that like storytelling element that I imagine becomes really important to the brand where you're really educating these about culture. So I can completely understand that. How has like CAC evolved as, there's a lot more D2C businesses. And so I'd love for you to, talk to how CAC has evolved. And then does that at all play into how you think about your acquisition of Japan Crate and, bringing on an omnichannel brand? I'd, love to hear your perspective there.
CAC has evolved in challenging ways over the last few years. I think there was this heyday for a lot of brands where, of course, all they had to do was spend 90% of their budget on Meta, and that would just be all they have to focus on. They don't have to worry about attribution because when you spend so much of your budget on one place, if things grow, you can just know it came from there. But ever since targeting has become a lot more difficult, a la, 2021, I think, with the privacy changes in iOS, people have been trying to find other creative ways to mostly, I would say, get top of funnel. Like mid funnel and bottom funnel is still, obviously it's become more challenging, but is not as, it hasn't been hit as hard as top of funnel where you're trying to just target and find those that are relevant to you. And so that's been something we've been working on as well, where now all of a sudden, as opposed to just having a single channel, I mean, even back then we never were single channel. We always diversified just in case. So we weren't hit as hard by back then. But like now you have to do a multi-pronged approach. You have to do Meta, Google, some influencer. You have to figure out the ways that work for you there. I'm seeing a lot more push into like both CTV and linear TV, as well as like any direct mail has made a huge comeback. But then as you kind of diversify, although it might give you cheaper CPMs, sometimes it then becomes difficult to do attribution and know what's working unless you're like very tightly controlling it, measuring it, being on top of your game. So now you have to spend resources on the like measurement part of it, which is of course a good thing to do. It's just everything takes more resources. And as a startup, that just becomes more difficult. So overall, of course, CACs have risen. One potential silver lining from all of this is that this basically makes it so that, this sounds maybe controversial to say, but only companies that truly have a strong brand or have good product market fit will be able to stick through it and stay around. Because like back then, I think literally if you could sell anything that you just drop ship from China, and if you just slap some good, cute branding and good commercial, like funny like advertisements on it, it could scale on Facebook.
Yeah.
But then there was like no retention, no repeat purchasing because you just acquired customers so readily. And I saw so many companies go that way and then just collapse when retention became more important.
So you think that there is now this shift to retention?
Yeah, yeah. But even then, like I mean, we focus heavily on retention. We've been trying win backs, retention rate, all of that, and it has improved marginally. But like unfortunately, it's not like you're going to double your retention through
Yeah.
retention efforts. Like I think at best you can increase it by 10 or 20%, which is amazing, of course, and is
Hmm.
but for scaling, if one's looking to scale still, acquisition is kind of still where it's at if you do it correctly. And that's just been difficult, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah.
How do you think about Japan Crate and, how that fits into the broader like Bokksu brand?
I mean, there were basically two big reasons we acquired Japan Crate last year. There were multiple, but like two big reasons to make it kind of clean and easy to understand. One of them, in the same lens, was by acquiring them, and we got it at a pretty decent price. We didn't disclose it or anything, but like that helped us grow our top line revenue and grow our future revenue growth potential in ways that just marketing is just not going to cut nowadays. And so, like, that was just also, speaking of CAC and a good way to kind of grow in that way, that was a very smart way to kind of grow that. But then two was because we have been wanting to get into omnichannel for years, but it's not so easy to do so. It's like easy to say so and be like, oh yeah, of course, like omnichannel makes sense. But then to build those retail relationships and define what products will sell well there and et cetera, and have some of that data is a very tall order slash will take years. And Japan Crate had already been in retail for about 4 years, I believe. So by acquiring them and integrating them, we now accelerated to overnight now being 5,000 doors throughout the country. And we're like on like kind of forecasting, expecting to get to something like 9,000 doors by end of year or beyond. And so we're like really looking to scale that part of the business.
So, what have you learned about retail and how does your like D2C mindset, like they're so different, but how are you kind of merging or bridging the two?
It's definitely a very different business. Like you have a lot less control over things than one is used to in D2C. And the cash conversion cycle is just
Mm,
so upside down
yeah.
compared to what we're also used to in D2C. And so all of a sudden, there's a lot more cash you need to do retail, slash, you need more financing partners. There's chargebacks in ways that you can't even like fight back against so easily compared to online businesses. And so these are all things you have to factor in your model that was kind of new to us. But beyond that, it's the inventory. Like you bring in inventory for retail, and especially for us that used to that D2C ships, as I mentioned, from Japan. So like if we don't sell it, then we don't ship it, and then we kind of figure out what to do with it in Japan, that inventory. Either sell it through one of our other channels, or we have like kind of partners there we can maybe offload to. But the issue with retail is that we're already imported it. We've already kind of paid for the shipping into America. If somehow it doesn't sell to a retailer, you're kind of left holding this bag, kind of trying to figure out what to do with that here type of thing. And so it adds to more cost. But having said all of that, we're loving our retail channel because there's no CAC and it like the gross and the fulfillment is relatively cheap because we're not individually shipping things. It's all ocean freighted and then kind of, trucked over to places. And so of course, you have to factor that into margins and things, but for the most part, also the retailers are happy with you. We've been finding that the reorder rates are really high. We have a 90% reorder rate in retail. Like that type of retention is hard to debate compared to a lot of DBC.
What do you think about the business very separately, or like is there a vision that, you said that there's no CAC in retail, that retail becomes an acquisition channel for the Bokksu brand?
I think it eventually can. Right now, we're not pushing it too hard just because we are kind of trying to get it right and trying to make sure we're not like messing anything up and really establishing these retail relationships that we only kind of integrated less than a year ago, I would say.
Yeah.
And so right now we're trying to just get up the revenue there. And once we establish some of those channels, because right now we're actually selling through the Japan Crate brand into retail,
Okay.
but once things are a little more stable, we plan to also produce our own like Bokksu branded snack products
Yep.
and then sell those into our existing channels. And that we think could have a lot of strong synergistic effects with online as well.
Is there any precedent or any thoughts of selling the Bokksu box itself, like a subscription box that's acquired through retail? Have you thought about that?
Unfortunately, that wouldn't work because the products that we put in the Bokksu box is really, truly exclusive to Japan slash have a shelf life that is not workable with retail. Like some of our snack products have only like 3 months of shelf life. When you
Mm.
DTC ship it from Japan, it works. And that's what makes it really special and fresh. Retail, you need shelf lives of like 9+ months to make it work. And so it works with the Japan Crate brand because it's a different, it's like more mass retail, mass kind of pop culture, bigger company brands that we put into Japan Crate. And so that's really wonderful in that way where we get like different potato chips and like eat Japanese potato chips or Japanese sweets and things that people like, but that have a bit more shelf life. And so that works under that kind of brand diffusion.
What about leveraging any of the tools that you're very familiar with from kind of the D2C channel to help support the sell through in retail?
That's actually one of the big things our retailers love about working with us is that a good example is we just launched in our first grocery retailer in June, I believe it was, called Giant Food in the DC area. And we launched in all the Giant Food locations. And they were so excited about is we were able to have kind of syncs and strategy calls with their marketing team to kind of time us kind of publishing about it across all of our social media channels because we have like collectively close, I think over 1 million or 2 million followers across TikTok and Instagram. And so that made them go like, oh my God, this is great. Like this gets the word out about Giant, like about this new launch. And so that kind of really helped spark some of that and hopefully helped with the sell through too. I mean, they placed a reorder and said that the velocity is good. So
That's awesome. Any failures in retail that you've learned from?
there's a lot of Uh, I mean, one of the big ones is that the world, including America, is just getting hotter and hotter. And some of our best sellers are like Japanese Kit Kats that we sell into retail as well. And if you're not smart or did it wrong or just didn't have the right oversight, we have shipped melted Japanese Kit Kats to retailers before just because we thought that it would be okay and it was only May or something, but then some parts of the country spiked up to over 100 degrees. And so then the whole thing had to be charged back, slash, we had to send a replacement. Like, that also sours some of the relationships. And now we have to look into booking reefers and shipping to retailers. And then that's really expensive. Who do you pass that cost on to? Or do we just not ship chocolate in the summer? It's unfortunate, like we have to find these workarounds. But a lot of these things become very different from D2C, where in those cases, what we do is we actually just don't put chocolate into our curations over the summer, but also on a worst case basis, because it's individual boxes, we just ship them a replacement if something goes wrong. And that usually works pretty well, type of thing, because sometimes it is just like a spike in temperature in certain areas. But in retail, you can't do that because then the whole lot is messed up. And so you have to be very careful about all the shipping.
Makes complete sense. I didn't even think about that. When you said hot, I like originally thought like people are emotionally hot, but you mean really the weather.
The weather, yeah, especially when you're doing food, it's just you have to be very careful about. That's the main thing is the melting point of food. But besides that, it's generally been kind of okay in terms of the shipping. But that one's something we have to always be careful of.
Okay, topical focus, something that you feel passionately about.
I feel really passionate about, I mean, I've been talking about bridging cultures, but beyond that, I think what I feel most passionate about is kind of Asian representation in a lot of these generally underrepresented places. And so a lot of that would be entrepreneurship, kind of a lot of the founder places, but also even selling into retail, like kind of having these businesses speaking out about what we're selling, giving it the right authentic voice while kind of being balanced about it, I think is still, I mean, it has grown a lot in the last few years. A lot of other really wonderful brands, and a lot of them are my friends, from Fly by Jane to New England Coffee Supply, Sanzo, etc. But like having more of that so that it's like the kind of right people that is kind of understanding the products and bridging that divide. I'm really passionate about that because it has true impact into what the consumers, then the end consumer, enjoys and tastes and like knows what is real and tastes good and all of that stuff. And
Yeah.
so like kind of continuing to push that, even though it is really hard because you're constantly educating people,
Yeah.
um, is not an easy place to be, but it's really fun.
Are there ways that others can help, amplify that? Like I'm, thinking about myself, like how could I help or like others that are listening to this podcast help with that?
I mean, I think the big way is to also themselves be, if they love the product and love the brand or the mission or the founder's like voice about it, like kind of help be evangelists for, right? So like people get really excited about certain brands and things. And I think that's just a good way is just sharing. And that's the beauty of food and beverage, I think, is that it's just so easy to share. Like, something that you wear, you might get really excited about, but it's not as easy to kind of share it. I guess you can show it per se, but with food, you can like get some, break it off, like share with
Yeah.
somebody, be like, oh my God, this tastes so great, or like, and I think that alone is like a big deal, just to get people's excitement about it too, and not be afraid of. I think some people might be like, oh, like I'm a little bit scared of like going venturing too far or saying the wrong thing, or like everybody's got to taste and start somewhere with
Yeah.
everything. So I think it's okay to just dive in and taste and try everything.
On your point on sharing, this weekend my family did a hibachi night,
Ooh.
and my sister-in-law brought out the Fly by Jing sauce, and I was like, "Oh my God, I know Jing, like I know the founder. That's so cool." But it was just like kind of this moment of yeah, like the stories, the sharing, so I can completely resonate with that.
As
Okay.
in, she brought it to the hibachi restaurant to put on
No, we
things.
actually did it at home hibachi where you like,
What?
and so she brought out the sauce to like be a compliment to the food that she was eating. And I was like, oh my God, you know this brand? Like I know
That,
it too. Isn't that awesome? So I had that like moment that you're describing. So lightning round, favorite omni-channel brand.
I probably think on that note, it would be Fly by Jing.
Yeah.
I think Fly by Jing has done a freaking wonderful job of marketing themselves online. And then they're in so many retail locations now and have done crazy collabs with like Shake Shack and all of these other really enviable, like respected brands everybody has. And I'm just like, how do they even have the time? So it's amazing.
What do you wish you could change about our industry?
I wish that people were more focused on unit economics and less on like flash in the pan type of situation. And to understand that like it takes time to build a lot of these things, and that it's not just about this like pump and dump, growing to certain numbers and looking to exit. I think that realization has set in for a lot of people. But back during the heyday, I think there was a lot of like pyramid schemy D2C brands in the space that were
Mm-hmm.
just like kind of pumping the numbers with a lot of like cheap ads and then just looking to get out before anybody noticed that the underlying economics were not great.
Makes sense.
I really like LinkedIn recently
Hmm.
because to me it is the least toxic and most positive space out of all the social media channels. So LinkedIn is a fun one.
I'm love LinkedIn too. Are you favorite book?
I recently have reread and now are reading a new trilogy, part of it, called Red Rising. It's one of the best dystopian sci-fi series ever. The writing is phenomenal, and there's a lot of critique about modern society in a lot of different ways, but also just a really fun read. Highly recommend Red Rising.
Okay, thank you. And then any event that you're planning to attend this year?
I am going to a conference in Tokyo. It's
Cool.
a US Japan Council conference. They do it in Tokyo every other year. And so that should be really fun. It's gonna be the first time attending it. And anything that has to do with like US and Japan bridging, I'm very excited about because there's
Yeah,
just obviously a lot of relevancy there.
totally. Makes complete sense. Danny, thank you so much. Where can people connect with you?
On my LinkedIn, but also I have Instagram. It's all like generally at Danny Tang, Taing.
Awesome. Danny, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
If you liked this podcast, follow me and the Bridge page on LinkedIn and Twitter for hot takes and tactical advice. If you really loved today's episode, we'd love a review on the podcasting platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.